Hi, Kevin. How are you doing? Okay, so I guess just you and I right now. So we'll see if people are going to be able to join us. Um, my internet is a little choppy, so I'll go ahead and share screen. Okay, so we are going to do some streaming services today. And then tomorrow, I'm going to go over how to set up game server. And then we will have some prototyping with additional activities. So for this week, you can check out, I posted the document and we are going to work on our project using Raspberry Pi 4 this week. You can use Zero, but it works best on Pi 4 because of the desktop environment. So for today, I want to walk you through how to use Icecast or Dark Ice. And this is a type of service that's going to allow us to do some media streaming server from home. And I will talk about how to really bring it public and to incorporate cryptography with it. Because if you use it as it's set, it's not completely safe. So we wanted to talk about how some of the streaming services would be if you put it on a website. So you can literally create your own radio station or a podcast station, and you can incorporate music or some talk sessions using this particular exercise. So as for those of you who just joined us, I'm looking at week 2 assignment. The plan for this is to go through the exercise and explain to you what we're using and how to start the services. Additionally, I want to touch back and talk about IoT development, design, and prototyping. So that will be at the end. Okay, so you can check out the assignment. The document is included there. I'll go ahead and bring up my document here. So to start, we are going to touch on a package that's from Dark Ice, or the package called Dark Ice, and that's from Icast. And I included a link for you here. Icast provided a lot of different type of services, so you can take a look at different packages that you can incorporate. There are streamings, apps, and easy stream type of services. So today we are going to use Dark Ice and ISIS 2 from ICAS. And this was created by Hungarian developers. It's been used across for a lot of different type of streaming service. So in your activity, it talks about how you can use Dark Ice. This is a free server software. So it is open source and you can use it for your own personal purposes. Um, you would, I recommend that you can adapt a sound card to your Raspberry Pi to really effectively capture sound and media. Um, and so I included things like the Hi-Fi Berry. So if you click on this, it gives you the link to something that you can adapt to your Raspberry Pi. And this particular sound card will run equivalent to what you would pay for Raspberry Pi itself, but this allows you to use it for the conversion between um, analog and digital, so you can digitize analog waves. And so, because as you know, that when we record, when we speak, or when you have music, that will be coming in as analog signal. So this might be something that you can adapt. And as you can see, there are ways that you can connect this. And if you use something like this, you also need to install its driver. And Hi-Fi Berry actually have a tutorial on how you can install the driver using the terminal. I had gone through the tutorial itself and take a look at how it's used with streaming service. And then there are other type of adapters that you can see here for audio, and also for other type of products. Okay. So that is provided in your document, the link. Um, so for today, all we need is a Raspberry Pi 4 with our Raspbian operating system installed on our micro SD and internet connection. So what we'll have is we will go through and we will work on this exercise. You do have an option to use this one, or you can do the game server, which will be covered tomorrow. So you can choose one or the other. I wanted to show you some ideas that you can use to be able to create your own IoT systems. And all of these are all connected. All the exercise we've been doing is using some source of internet applications or services somehow. So in streaming audio over your network, the way that we create this, we can use it to access internally, locally inside your home network, but you can also put it on, you can host it as on on the web and then be able to connect to it. But you need to implement connection that would be secure. So some of the protocols that would be distributed for audio would be your AirPlay, your Roon, your Squeezebox. And the studios that you see that's available on the internet, likely that they're using um, AES 51 and or your AVB. So now you want to implement something that would work with with the user browser, so they can just simply connect to your web page and then be able to listen to your stream services. And this is how you would see a lot of the online radio station works, is that they would have a server system, and that server system is connected to the web server, or it's hosted as a page or a website on the web server, and then you would then have a URL you can distribute to the user. You can require the user to authenticate or create an account if you wanted to implement that as part of your web services, or you can just simply put it onto um, the interactive page so the user can click. So, and the web services that you can find out there, you can find free web hosting services like no IP. However, you have to put ads or banners on your page. But if you want to pay, you can go with some web hosting company like GoDaddy, or even some Amazon-based type of product. So here it talks about how some of the variations in the protocols for the multimedia streaming, and especially when we're looking at audio. So now with the streaming services, the benefit of that is that usually it requires a small amount of bandwidth compared to what you would see with if we are looking at streaming video or something that's a little bit more intensive. So you can create your web radio and you can have subscription to your web radio. So users can connect using their computer, tablets, or mobile phones. So definitely you can consider this can be. And so IoT device doesn't have to be something that truly have a lot of different sensors or something that's very physical. It could be something that's very web oriented, and it could be a web service. Um, Now, the disadvantage of this is that you do come across some buffering issues. So, in the long run, when we're looking at hosting and building these type of servers, we want to consider something that would have enough RAM to accommodate the user bandwidth, and then also the traffic that's coming in that's connecting to your site, and then also considering the type of connectivity that we're using. So network connection is very important in the IoT environment. So you want to make sure that it would be adequate for the amount of users that you're servicing. So to start, we will start working with our Raspberry Pi. In your Pi terminal, you would start with getting your updates. So I'm gonna walk you through that. So let me get to my VNC here, and let me reconnect to my Pi. Hold on. Let me restart the app. So let me delete this, and I'm just gonna reestablish the connection. One second. Sorry, I just tested VNC and it was working earlier. So let me double check my Raspberry Pi real quick. It seems to be timing out. Okay, so while you wait, you can go ahead and open your terminal. You can then run your update and upgrade. That might take a few minutes. So before you start installing any package on your Raspberry Pi, you want to run the updates. So let me get on Zoom on this side because my VNC sometimes. All right, I think it's responding now. Okay. Then once you have your updates, what we're going to do is we are going to get the Dark Eyes package and we will install it. So we will use wget, and we're going to pull it from sorry, we will pull it from the GitHub, which is the repository for Dark Eyes. Okay. So let's see. Yeah, I'm getting timeout on this because sometimes let me get on Zoom on this side real quick. Oh, it's in. A little touchy today. All right, so let's start with sudo. One second. I'm getting booted off. Okay, let me get on Zoom over here and then we'll go through it, okay? So as you finish the updates and upgrade, you would then pull Dark Ice repository. And then we would then be able to get that going. Okay. All right. So let me stop sharing this side. And then I will go ahead and share on this side. Okay, it's gonna be a little laggy on the Raspberry Pi side. So I just want you to know. Okay. So first we're gonna do sudo app update, and that will go for a bit. Then, sorry, it's not bringing forward my. Okay. Then we are gonna do sudo app upgrade. And that might take a minute for it to go. Then after that, what we're going to do next is we are going to download the package for Dark Ice. So we would do wget https github.com x20. And so if you have VNC, you can copy and paste the command in Dark Ice with MP3 for Raspberry Pi blob master Dark Ice 1.0.1.999 till MP3 +1 ARM jeff.db raw is true. Oh, I think I have a typo on here. Yeah, I've been unsuccessful with. Zero, one. Oh, I have a typo. Huh? Okay. So let me fix this real quick. While I'm trying to get on VNC or SSH. Okay. So then after you have, sorry, um, so you can copy and paste this in to your command line or your terminal. Then you are going to do the MV. Okay. So we are going to move the package. After that, we are going to install some library. So all of these are going to be required for your Dark Ice to work. So first, you need to pull it from the GitHub repository. Then you are going to be able to move it. Then you are going to install additional library. And then after that, you would then be able to access the package. I'm double checking. Dark Eyes with MP3, Raspberry Pi, Bulb Master, Raspberry Pi, Dark Eyes. Okay. Any questions so far? Let me check the chats. Okay, no questions. Okay, so after you pull the package, sorry, I couldn't get on my Pi to show you. The next step after that is you are going to install Icast 2. And earlier when we looked at the web page, Icast 2 it would contain Dark Ice, and that's what we would need. This is the service for our streaming server. Okay, so as you execute this command, what you would see is you would see the configuration interface that's going to pop up. And so with that, what you would have to do is you are going to use your keyboard to be able to select yes or yes. So you want to configure it. So you need to select yes. And it's going to default there. So you just you select yes and press enter. Then on the next screen, you're going to see is you are going to see, okay, so let's wait a little bit. Albert just got on. But for those of you who got through getting the package from GitHub, go ahead and install your Icecast too. And I'm going to try to VNC back into my Raspberry here and see if it's going to connect to me. As I was facing some issues with my network earlier. Yeah, bandwidth is a little oh, this is so frustrating. Sorry. Okay. So Albert, are you able to update and upgrade your Raspberry Pi yet? And is everybody there? Okay. All right. So once you install the update and upgrade, you need to pull. Okay, it shows that I'm connected. So we will see that it's able to authenticate me. Okay, so we would need to pull the GitHub package. Okay, and then we're going to install additional library. Okay, so there's a question about passwords. One second. Yeah, so you don't need to type in admin for the default password. So I suggest that you change up the password. There are 3 passwords in the process. Um, and as you change it, you gotta make sure that you are going to be updating the configuration file that we will work on next. So make sure that when you create those passwords, make sure that we remember those passwords. You should change them because the default one is hackme and the default user. You can leave admin as it is, but you want to be able to use the right password. If you leave it as hackme, you can test it with hackme, but keep in mind that that's not safe. Okay, so you can change it. Okay, so once we have the library and the package downloaded, okay, then you would install Icecast 2, because the first version has been depreciated, so we want to use the latest one. Okay, and then we are going to configure the Icecast 2. So your localhost name, you can leave it as localhost, okay? And then you just select OK. then you are going to set up the user account. Now, security wise, right? Like when you use this, you modify the user. If you put your server on the web, you don't want to use admin. Then also you want to, because the local host is going to be pertained to the port 8000, which is what we're going to use. Okay. And so when you change up the password, there are three passwords. So if you leave it as hackme, it will be all three hackme. But if you change it up, make sure that you remember your password information. Okay. So once you go through that process of creating the password for the connectivity, you can also actually create logs for the users um, that's accessing your server as well. Okay. There are resources online that shows you how you can do that. But for now, what we're going to do is we're going to simply just install the service using the admin account and see if it works. So in the next part, you are going to use Nano in Linux. And Nano is a text editor. Nano also exists in Mac OS terminal, right? So you can call up Nano and you can create a new file called darkice.cfg. So whenever you see the file extension CFG, that pertains to configuration. And all the applications and your system, it uses configuration file to basically would store certain configuration and settings that we would have for that particular type of service. So with Icast 2, what you're doing here is you are creating a configuration file that have all the appropriate settings that you need for that particular server. Okay. So when you call up Nano, you would give it a file name. And in this case, we are writing a configuration file. And so with the configuration file, we want to state the type of settings that we want for our service. So after you have created the file, you would see it in Nano. Then you're going to copy all of this text. Make sure that you have everything, because if it's missing, it's not going to work. Okay. You're going to copy and then you're going to paste it into the file inside the terminal once you call it up. Okay. Now keep in mind that there's a section for password, which is right here. Okay. Make sure that it matches the password that you have earlier that you created. So if you use hackme, you need to put hackme, okay? If you create a password like password 123, for example, you need to make sure that that's there, okay? Otherwise, it's not going to work. And make sure that we have the entire content for that file. So I'm going to run through this while you're doing that, okay? So for the seconds that we wanted to use for encoding, can we leave the password empty? No, because when you configure it earlier, you had used either the default password, which is hackme, or you wrote in a new password. So, and as you configure, you should not leave the password blank, because leaving the password blank just opens up your system to a lot of problems. Yeah, so if you click OK there, Albert, it will just use hack me. I recommend modifying. Yeah. So I need to make a password. Yes, that is correct. You need to either use the default password that they gave you there, or you make your own password. I recommend having your own password. Okay. So after you created your password, then you're going to make the configuration file. And in this configuration file, you would state how it's going to be encoding. Okay. 0 is going to mean forever. So here you can see all the comments. Buffer, that's going to be for your buffer time. So that will be about 5 seconds. And that's okay. That won't be too much of a lag. And then you can reconnect it in case it gets disconnected. So click yes. So put yes there. Okay. So we need to copy this entire file content. Okay. And put it into the darkice.cfg. And then once you do that, you would hit Control X and then Y for yes, and then enter to save. Okay. And in the configuration file, we also want to state the connection type or the configuration for connection. What should you name it? I'm sorry, which step are you at? Alex? Are you referring to the file or are you referring to the name, certain name? Oh, here? Okay, so you can name it anything you want here. So you can say, um, we can say stream home, stream channel, or something like that. We can say streaming radio home, something, whatever you like to put your name. So let's say that you want to have your own talk radio about certain things, you can put in your, what your preferred name. Okay. So in the name section, you can name it anything you want, but make sure that you update your password because the default one is hack me. And there are 3 passwords that you would create in the steps. Okay. So the format that we're going to be using is MP3. Keep in mind that it will be MP3. Okay. And then for your device, also notice that this is your sound card audio input. So this would work if you have some kind of sound card and be able to capture. Now, once you set this up, you can use your computer to record your session and then, and then transfer it to your Raspberry Pi. That will be fine. Or if you use your Raspberry Pi directly, you need to install the appropriate audio devices so that way it can record your voice or whatnot. But this will be your sound card audio input. So I suggest that you would use a sound card with it if you have one. Okay. Now they have USB plugged in ones. You can buy the one that would be USB, or you can, use your computer, record something, and then transfer the file over to the server and then be able to stream it there. Okay. I will do an exercise later this week on how to sync files across your devices from your Raspberry Pi. So we'll do a file sync server in the last 2 days. Okay. So here it's simply just state your sample rate, which is going to be the frequency You can change it to low or high frequency depending on how you want it. Okay. But the average, the middle would be 22,050 for the hertz. And then for your server, we stated that it's going to use MP3. The bit rate for the stream sent from the server is going to be 320. Okay. And then your local host name, make sure that this match up with whatever you have as the name. So earlier we had kept it as localhost, so we would keep it the same here. Okay, because if you have a mismatched configuration file with what you have configured in Icast 2, it's gonna create problem and you won't be able to have all the components. Okay. And then, so your mount is always going to be stream.mp3. So what will happen is this is going to become an extension to the web page that you will visit. Okay. So it's going to make the Raspberry Pi host the stream service using the port 8000. And if you put /stream.mp3, it's going to tie that to the service for the stream, which is a separate page. Okay. And then the description, you can put in some kind of description here if you like. So this is the highlighted area. You can modify it with your file. Okay. And then you can have it publicly disclosed. So once you have your file done, you would then need to save it as Control X. If you simply copy and paste everything from what I had stored on that portion of the document, you will likely can see the service, but you will be missing out some of the things with the MP3. Okay. So make sure that you customize it to how you have it, like the password. And if you have some kind of name for the stream, and if your local host name is different, then you need to make sure that you change your host name. So then once you save it, the way Nano works is you would hit Control X to exit, and it's going to prompt you to save your file or not. And you would press Y for yes, and then you would press enter, and it's going to bring you back to the terminal. So you can be in the terminal and you can directly access text editor to be able to create file, and you can even navigate to where you want it to be. Okay. So after we created the darkice.cfg, we will create another file called darkice.sh. And the sh extension stands for shell. Okay, and it would use the bash shell base. So you can create a shell script, and then you would then need to run that script. And so scripting simply allow us to really streamline some of the operation. So in the case, let's say I don't want to restart the service every time I turn on my Raspberry Pi, I can create a script file and save it to a certain location so it can be automated, or it can be used as it needs that to run a specific service, in our case, Dark So you would then use Nano again, and in this time, you are going to create a file called darkice.sh. And to save your file again later on, you would then need to do the same thing, okay? So as you execute this command, sudo nano darkice.sh, it's going to open up a blank file. and then you simply copy this particular command and paste it into that file and save it. Okay. So after you do that, okay. So after you run the script, you would then, I'm sorry, after you create the script, you would then copy and paste this command inside it. So what does it mean? It means that the file is going to contain the command that it's going to look for your dark eyes dot configuration, right? Dot dark eyes.cfg in uh, in here in home directory and pi directory, and it's going to copy that to the bin dark eyes. So as the application requires that file to run, we want to execute this command as we had stored it in a different location, and it's going to bring it over to the application location so that way it can run. And so Linux is very hierarchical in a way that application file needs certain configuration file, and if you have it in a different location, it won't be able to execute the configuration as you require to do so. So what we're doing here is we're writing a script that would, or we're writing a file. This is the shell script file that would contain the command. So every time that it uses that, when dark eye need to use the configuration, it would need to know where to go to obtain it. Then we would then save it. Okay. Now in the USR bin, what happened, and also in your, when you create the configuration file, you have to change up the permission for that file. This is why people argue that Linux has better security control as far as file management and system management, is that right off the bat, right, it's going to be least privilege first. So even when you create the file, you have to make sure that it can be executed or read or write. Okay. So the way that Linux works with permission is that when you use the chmod command, what that does is you are doing change, right, permission using numerical value. Okay. So what you're doing here in step 11 is that you're changing the permission to the file that you had created in these folders. Because without having the modification and permission, your file will not be an executable file. So we want the script file to execute because we want that command to work. Okay. So in step 11, all we're doing is we're changing the permission for the dark eyes.sh. Okay. So once you have that going, once you change the permission, then you can start initializing the service. Because if you don't change the permission, when you try to initialize the service, it cannot execute the script. Therefore, it cannot get access to the configuration file, then it will not work. Okay, so there are many layers to the process that we have to. So when you work on project like these, you have to think about like how system is accessing resources and how those resources are managed security wise, operating system wise, where the file is located and how you can access those configuration file. Okay, So after you have the darkeyes.sh configuration, the permission change, then you would then start the service by doing sudo service icast start. Then it will then at that point it would start the service. Okay. But what if we want to start the service every time the Raspberry Pi start up? Okay. What if when you turn on the Raspberry Pi, you want your streaming service to go? So realistically, in the server environment, you don't have to go in and start the service every time that you boot up your server. Okay. It should be automatically starting up the service that you intend for it to use and provide for the user. So step 14 and the next step, it's going to use cron tab. Okay. Now, if you don't want the service to start every time you boot up your Raspberry Pi, then you don't have to do these two steps. Okay. These two steps is if we want to automatically have that service initialized. Now, cron tab is a function that is incorporated in Linux to schedule tasks. Okay. And you can use Nano or Vim, which is a text editor, to put in the time that you want to start a certain type of service, or you can have it on every reboot boot. So in step 14 and 15, when you hit Contab E, you would likely see three options. I forgot to edit this. So you would select Nano, which is option 1. And so in it, so basically you're creating a schedule file using a text editor once you call on contab. Okay. And dash E just allows you to be able to make that setup. Now, if you need more details on contab, you can do the help option and it will show you how you can use contab in if you need to set specific date, right? Like let's say I wanted to make it, the end of the month, right? So I would put in the month, the day, the year, and the UTC time as it would use universal time. All systems, they by standard, they would use that. And so you can set up the time so that way the service would be automatically used. So why would we care to do that? What if you are not rolling out live right now? What if you're still testing? What if you want that server to go up a week from now? You can actually use Contact to set that up. And so you would then need to select the Nano option. Oops. And then you would copy and paste this into the bottom. So you got to use your arrow key to go all the way down to the bottom of that file. And then you would put in at reboot sleep 30 sudo home pi dark eyes sh. So what we're doing here is we would tell it every time that it reboots, wait 30 seconds, then it's going to go in and it's going to look for the dark eyes sh file in the home and pi folder. And with that, it's going to run that script file, which where it's going to copy the configuration file for the application to use. So it would start the service. Okay. Once you have everything, then you would save again because you just use Nano by doing Control X and then press Y and then press enter. After that, you need to reboot your Raspberry Pi because then you would see that it's effective. So after reboot, we would need to wait about 30 seconds. Okay, so wait about a minute or so. Then you are going to put in the URL on the web browser inside the Raspberry Pi. So you would use Chromium and then you would put in HTTP, your Pi IP address, :8000. Okay. And so if your IP address is something like this, you would put in your IP address and then make sure that you have the 8000 port because we had stated this in the configuration file. We put in 8000 for the port that it would use to be able to use for our streaming service. Okay. You should see the page which comes up black, and then you can click on M3U, and sometime, the first time it might ask you for, you can click on admin and you can see all the configuration that's set. And then you can also look at mount point to see if your MP3 is there. You can also try your IP address 8000/stream MP3. If the MP3 doesn't come up correctly, that means that somewhere in your configuration file there's a mismatch with the Icast 2. Okay, so you want to go back to the prior step here and be able to check all the things that needs to go in. Okay, resave it, restart the service, and reboot the system, and then check it. Okay, any question? Okay, so once you reboot, wait about 30 seconds, then you can open up the web page and see if you have Icast service going. It should show you in the black page. And if you see the MP3 extension, it's because you did everything correctly in the configuration file. If you didn't have the MP3 extension for that service, that means that there might be some mismatch in the configuration. Okay. So at this point, right, after you complete 14, 15, 16, and 17, you should be able to see your streaming service on your Raspberry Pi. Now, you can also, what you can do is if you want to play live music online, right, and then invite people to visit your site to do that, you would then need to link your Raspberry Pi with a domain, a web domain, a DNS that's active on the web. So you would then need to link it to a public IP. And then, you know, then you would then create user accounts for the user to be able to connect to it. I would do that to prevent security issues because all of this stuff is pretty transparent from your server. Okay. So let me show you one that's been done online. 1 second, okay? Let me find the page for you. Um, I've seen somebody's example that he had put on the web using this particular exercise. Let me find it. while we wait, do you have any questions for me? So there are several tutorials like this available on online. Maker did one, and also there are quite a few online resources that also post different ones. So I had tested a couple of them, and then some of them actually write their own files, and um, there are some additional resources. Let me see if I can find it again. Oh, right here. Okay. So this is somebody else's. So you can see that somebody else did something, this particular exercise, right? And this person had tied that to a web service, a domain, okay? Um, and you can find like DNS, you can find web services that are free, right? Like no IP, and there's some available out there, or you can find pay for one, okay? And then you can have it where it would be like this, okay? Any question? Okay, it says that the site cannot be reached on yours. I use the terminal on the Pi and input the host name. Okay, so Albert, number one, your IP address, you would issue IP address command in your terminal and make sure your IP address is matched up. And so, or you can do ifconfig and look for inet at inet. It would say 192.168.0.x or something like that. Okay. If we did not put 8,000, can we use any port, or is it, yeah, it has to be 8,000 because we previously configured that when we install Icast 2 as port 8,000. So make sure the site that you cannot, because it's not reaching, is possibly number one, your IP address is not matching up to your host IP address, which is your Raspberry Pi. Number two, make sure that so in the configuration file, you use port 8,000, and that's what you would use. Now, down the line, if you wanted to use other ports, right, you would then need to configure your Icecast to use other ports, and you would need to use a uncommon port. Okay. So the way that 8,000 is used, this particular service is known to use 8,000, so that's what we use. So your host name I has a different IP address. Let's see what you're referring to. But host name is just you just calling a host name. Yeah, that's a loopback address. You cannot use that. It should call home on that. When I did step 16, it says bash no such file or directory. Okay, so did you do 13 and 14 prior, Alex? Okay, so first off, Albert 127.0.0.1 is a loopback address. Okay, don't use that one. It has to be like something like 190. So look for the INET that says 192.168.0. etc. Okay, and then for Alex, when you did 16, so that means that your bash file was not saved to the right location. Okay, so I suggest going back. So what you can do, Alex, is you need to open up File Manager, okay? And then you are going to click on Home, then you are going to click on Pi, and I want you to see if you can find um, Icast, what is it called? Or darkice.sh. Okay, because okay, it says I can get into iCast 2 on the browser and even log into admin home, but it doesn't show any active mount points when I put stream. Yeah, so oh, okay. It's not letting you do the stream MP3. Yeah, so Alex, you can redo that part again. For Kevin, when you, okay, so you're able to see the admin home and you're not able to find the stream.mp3. Let me, so you need to take a look at your configuration file again and make sure that you have the proper password, because, and then on your mount point, you kept it the same. Here, let me share screen. For 8,000, name, description. So open up your, so go back to terminal and then you can just do sudo nano darkice.cfg, Kevin, and take a look at the content for your file again. Okay. And then if not, I can also give you another configuration file. Okay, 1 second. So alternatively, let me drop a file. Let me save this. Start ice dot cfg. See if I can drop this into Zoom chat. Okay, so Albert, it says that it cannot be reached, or it can. So I think that you're missing something. Okay. First of all, did you find your IP address? And then 1 second. For Kevin, I'm going to attach something. You can try this file, okay? Once you open it, you can use the text editor to open it and then copy and paste it into your configuration file. But make sure that you change your password and all of that information. Let's see. Okay, but open that with a text editor, not Notepad like Sublime or something. And you should be able to copy and paste that. I have the same problem as Kevin, except for mine says 400 unrecognized command. Okay. So it gives you the 400, and then, okay, so let's address this one at a time. First, Albert, right? I want you to check to see if you have all the configuration file, the dark-ice.cfg. So use your file manager, go in and look at home, look at Pi, look at your dark-ice.cfg to see if it's there, okay? And then again, you would look at home.pi.darkice.sh. Make sure that your .sh file has the appropriate. So I think you're missing some steps, Albert. Second, for Kevin and Claudia, I had sent out to everyone a configuration file, which is slightly different than the one that you have in your notes. You can open it with the text editor, and then you can recopy and paste that into your configuration file. So you would then call up in your terminal, you would call up sudo nano darkice.cfg, and then take a look, and then you can recopy and paste the content in there and then save it. Like it says it does not exist on the file in the chat. Okay. 1 second. I'm going to put it on Canvas. Okay. Let's see if Canvas will take the configuration file. I wonder if the firewall is going to boot it out. But 1 second, I'm going to upload it on Canvas. Okay, it's on the assignment page now. You can find the download there. In sudo service icast start, do I replace contab E with start or do I put under command? Okay, so sudo service icast to start, that's separate. Okay, after you, okay, so I think you got the step confused, Albert. So make sure that you did all of these files and they are in your home and Pi folder. You can check the content for those. You need to run the start first, execute this in terminal. Then you need to open up cron tab. So after you run this, it just gives you the next line. Then you're going to run this in terminal. After you run contab-e, then you will select nano. And then in nano, it would open up a file. Then you're going to go to the end of that file and you're going to paste this in. Okay. Read the instruction here. It says add the below command to the end of the file. So you don't do this until you run contab-e, but you need to start the service first. So I think you got the step mixed up. Okay, for Kevin and Claudia, I had put the file right here. You can download it and then open up your text editor so you can look at the content. It's going to be very similar. Okay, so on this, it just make sure that you change up the password to it again, right? And then we would create a mount point that's going to be a little bit different to see if it's going to take. Okay, so you can specify your mount point and then the name. Other questions? Now, all else, if you can't get the MP3 mount point on it yet, but you know that that services has started, okay. And we can't really truly test it until you have some kind of audio or sound capturing device. Okay, I did put in some of your, if you're using your headphones and things like that, but your system needs to have some kind of adapter to be able to convert, your analog signal to, so you have to have a way to record it. Okay. And you can use an application to record it, or you can use some kind of capture hardware. So we can't fully test it. So all else fail, if you get the services running and it load the page with the port 8000, but you don't have a mount point on there, that's okay. You can just use that as a completed exercise. Okay, so for Claudia and Kevin, that will be okay. I'll take a look at it to see why it's not letting you mount the actual MP3, but you can create other mount point there. And for the server, you can also change up, instead of using its name like localhost, you can put in its actual IP. And don't use the loopback address, which is the 127. That one works locally, but in general, in the network environment, it doesn't work. So when you give that address to someone else, all that is that address is going to be their loopback. Okay. It's just going to call itself. So we want to use the 192 address. Okay. So alternatively, you can use this file and make sure that your darkeyes.sh, which is the second file, has the line that you need, that one line. You need to save it at the end of the file. So read the instruction there on how to do those steps. Okay. If it's not in the right folder, it's also not going to load. So we want to make sure that it's placed in the correct folder or directory because we told the system to go look for it there. Okay. So essentially from, step 8 through 15 are very important. Whether it's able to load or not is going to be depending on if you complete the steps as is shown there. Okay. Okay. Other questions? Okay. So while we're troubleshooting and getting all of that in, right? So redo the steps if you're missing files. There are two separate files. The SH is different than the configuration, and make sure that we follow the instructions. And also, you can always go to their documentation. I'll show you the documentation here in case you want to troubleshoot and look at some of the areas. Okay. They have the documentations. You can go in and you can take a look at how to use, for example, like you saw the interface, if you successfully load it, how you can administer it. Here's the configuration file information. So earlier I had questions about port settings. I would ask that. So you can go in, and as you notice, this particular package is written to use this particular port. Okay, so it's going to bind using SSL. And then also it shows you how you can set up socket for your mount point. So there are more to this than just getting it to really load, right? You can also modify it where you can specify how the socket would be bind. Okay. Then, so I highly recommend looking at the sections on Icast, and then you can tweak up, the configuration or modify it and see. Okay. And it's going to be using secure socket layer. Now, SSL is not very safe, right? Um, the industry transitioned over to using TLS with SSL or transition completely to TLS. So keep in mind that you are using SSL and SSL has flaws. So whenever you use SSL type of service, you want to make sure that you push updates regularly, okay? And then you want to implement security control with your services that you're providing over the web, okay? But for in-home use, that's fine. You can test it with like local network. But if you do put this on the public network, make sure that you go through the documentation and read the recommendations on how you can set up, right, user accounts and authentication. You can manage your user and don't use your admin account. Okay, you can also manage log on it where you would see who's accessing your particular server. and then how you can set up your client's connection and all of that. Okay. So recommended that you look through. Okay. You can also set up the maximum number of listener, and that kind of give us the option to really reduce the bandwidth to what we want. Because if your channel grows to be very large, you will have depreciation in the bandwidth that you're offering based on your web connectivity, of course. Okay. So there are great resources that you can refer to. And so I basically give you the basic to really walk you through on how to, you know, set up something and you can make it grow and have fun with it. Maybe you'll have your own streaming channel. You can talk about different things in the world, um, and so on. You can share it with everybody. Okay. Question. Okay. No question. I had tested this exercise a few times. Okay. And then I just re-imaged my R Pi. Just I wanted to show you with the initial process, but for some reason I'm not able to get VNC going today with my network connectivity. It's a little poor today from my side. So sorry about that. Okay. So one of the objectives that I have to hit in this class is to show you some details about if you want to build a business, with IoT. Um, and that was written with the curriculum. So on your module for this week, on the notes page, there's some resources about that. Okay. Now, I didn't completely put in together like the entire plan, but this would be something that you should think about when you start working on building a business out of Internet of Things. Let's say that you want to have, internet streaming radio with subscription for your members, or you want to build some kind of servers or something that's physical with sensor. How do you really think about you can monetize some of this, right? So this kind of give you the overall outlook on how you can generate revenue and profit. And the resources that I pour from some of the consulting website on their cases that they have used with businesses. Okay. So in the first week, we talked about design thinking and how to really think about your approach in IoT design. But in right now in this week, we want to focus on how we can really make money or really prototype something that can be for consumer or for commercialization. Okay. So um, overall, if we're looking at a business model just really give you the layout on how you can generate profit. And so it should really list the type of services. So if I'm doing internet streaming radio, I need to think about the type of service I would have. I would have to have some kind of domain, and that would cost me either monthly or annually. And based on that, that will be my base cost, right? What I invest into the business. And so I have to think about the services, like the web hosting portion of it for the domain, and then also the administration for my online radio, right? And the amount of time that I put into it, the things that I need to contribute to it, the MP3 that I need to be able to record or stream live, and so on. So I need to really lay that out, and that should contain your processes on how to generate profit. So as of late, Internet of Things had transitioned more to software-oriented Internet of Things. Services that people can acquire. It doesn't have to be a physical appliance that you would buy. Most people think about, oh, a smartwatch, smart device, etc. That's great. But at the same time, you do have an option to really think about the growth in the software itself. Now, if you build a physical system, you also need to have the software implementation and growth because using a hardware won't do any good if the user doesn't have the software to interface with it. Okay. So the things that you have to really drill down on is that for the production of this, you have to really think about the full automation. Last week I talked about the WhatsApp remote control, and my husband said that, oh, it's no good if you have to really make the human click and put the cursor so close so that way it would activate. So you have to really think about the fully automation or very little human interaction. Interesting enough, I was watching TV yesterday and I saw the new Apple Watch, right? Their advertisement is really based on sports. And one of the feature that they implemented is the fall down feature. That if the person who wears the watch, if they fall down, it automatically launched them with a message asking them, "Are you okay? Do you need help?" Right? So if the person is okay, they would tap okay. And then if they need help, they would tap the button they need help. So it should, the sensor itself should automatically detect some of the motion, some of the things that would, so they would apply the condition where it would be if that person physically falls down, right? What kind of changes that it would sense wearing that watch. So applying that same concept, if we think about sensors and how that needs to be connected, the sensor would constantly generate some kind of data. And using that data, you can hone down on the conditions on how your system should be performing or what your system should be giving the user. So here it talks about how you would implement the sensors and how that would be connected to the internet only, not only to generate data, but also to collect the data. And so when you think about now utility of that service, the cost in operation and the cloud. And as you expand, it won't be cheap. Okay. Sorry, I'm just getting really spotty internet today. So bear with me here. Okay. So here it brings up some of the things that you need to really think about how you want to be implementing into your business model if you want to build a business out of it. Okay. And even when you're generating some profit, and most of the time, statistically, we know that for most startup, especially really small startup, you won't really break even until after the 5 to 7 years mark, right? So when you're generating profit, your service can also be a way for you to deliver information. And that's what we see with streaming radio today. It doesn't have to be something that the user has to purchase as a physical appliance. And then I also include your strategies on what you should be doing if you want to build prototype your IoT device. Most businesses, they would use the existing knowledge. Okay. So when you think about how you want to really provide this to the user, they are familiar with certain things, the way that they use the system, right? As research has shown, right? And if you want a really new system that has new interface, the learning curve is going to be high and likely that the user will not like the system first off. Okay. So what you want is you want to base it on something that's familiar to the user, that maybe that's existing knowledge already, right? If you don't have that, you would research it. Then you would need to really think about what would be familiar, okay? And and how can you really find out some of the data points in that, right? What makes the other business fail in some area that you can improve on? So building on some knowledge, that's going to be important. User insights and research development, you should let people test it, right? When you build your streaming radio or your Internet of Things, have somebody in your family test it and give you feedback. And when you get constant feedback is when you're going to be able to quickly, rapidly prototyping in design thinking. Okay. So now everything that we design should be addressing a problem. So when you're thinking about what kind of things that you want to put on your internet radio, think about a problem that you're trying to solve. That will be your draw in your selling point in all of that. If you're just building an appliance that's already abundant out there, it's not going to sell, of course, because then you're now competing with the bigger manufacturer, and that will be harder. Then you have to lower your costs or and how you would sell to the consumer the price, and that would generate less profit. Okay, so think about how it would address the problem and how it can benefit the user in the long run. Like I said, Apple, they thought about the fall down feature on their smartwatch, right? That might be something that a lot of, sport people, athletics type of people would use. And so they implemented that and they would target those type of consumer and because it will benefit them. Okay. And so in your strategies, you have to really think about your unique selling point and then also importantly privacy and security, how you're able to retain privacy for your consumer. That's super important. You see a lot of tech company being in trouble for this because this is a very difficult area, especially for IoT. Okay, because services and things constantly changing, the technology constantly changing, so we have to keep up with that, and therefore there's a high demand in assessment for security. Okay, so if you use encryption, and we use encryption in a lot of different things, files, especially communications and authentications and web connection, even when you're using SSH, right? You're using encryption for that particular session. So in order to really remotely control your appliances or your service, you really have to think about how encryption would play a big key in it, how you would manage the keys, how it would be interacting with the user. Is the process going to be quick or slow? So, and how you would maintain the privacy of their data over time. And then the fifth part is to really think about predictive maintenance, and the drive of that is going to be the data. Okay. And so I also put down 4 steps in how you can use data for IoT operations. And so there are some really good questions that were brought up. And, you know, I looked at a case on how they really build out the processes on how they would design an Internet of Thing appliance to from the point it's designed going into production. And this is a larger manufacturing company. Okay. From the time that you generate the idea and understanding what kind of problem that you're dealing with and finding the appropriate solution and generating your idea and put that into concept and prototyping. So you're looking at 3 weeks here, 4 weeks there. So a month here, a month there, 2 months. So that's 4 months. Another 4 months, that's 8 months. So we're looking at about between 8 months to a year for something to go into production. And this is why they say that sometime technology would be dated. So you wanted, if you wanted to shave off the time, you have to put in the man hour and the resources and find the company that can quickly produce for you, right? Rapidly turning around what, what you prototype. So that can be a a larger challenge than you initially thought of. Okay. I have a family member that he built IoT device. He created a medicine box that, it would have an app to remind you to take your medication or your vitamins. It's the size of a smartphone. And his selling point is about $200 for it. And he's right now at 20 to 50,000, uh, you know, com- components for commercialization. And they made Forbes magazine and everything, but at the same time, he's still not making profit after a few years. So it is a very tough market. You really have to have a unique selling point. You really have to have fast prototyping and testing, and you need to make sure that it scales. If it's a hit, right? You don't want it to fail because there's so many people that wanted it and your servers just couldn't handle it. So you want to make sure that you have, money and resources to make sure that it's going to scale in the long run. Okay, so this type of business is big right now, and it's going to be big for a long time. So if you are not sure, I put down some ideas. So this particular page gives you great ideas in different categories. It's a blog, but if you go down, they give you the breakdown on, you know, the active devices that are being used in the world, and what kind of business you can get into. Okay. And then some of the areas that you need to look at, like security, and what kind of expectation you would be in 2023. So there's huge amount of money that's being put into IoT security. So if you get into the development and the design of this, right, if you become engineer in this area, it's also a hit too, because this is a really growing market for most part. Okay. And then for some startup opportunity, big in healthcare, big area in healthcare right now. Okay. And so, from earlier years to now, in Europe and also in the United States. And then you can also look at, after you design, you can go into patenting. Okay. And then it goes into if you wanted to use IoT for manufacturing, that's also big, right? And supply chain is a really, huge area that's going to be capitalizing on this. So you can think about the type of companies that you want to really address. So think about a problem that you want to solve. Okay. And then 3D printing, because of that, it really drives a lot of the growth in the other areas for IoT. And then in retailing, okay, because a lot of the time we're buying things online now. So IoT devices will be good for, like, now they have smart shelves, they have, packaging robots, they have a lot of like these really cool um, equipment that we can use that would be, giving us data and, to prevent theft and things like that for retail. So that's really big. Also, mobile checkout system, um, and then different areas and what you can look at in discount and things like that. Okay. And then in agriculture and farming, that's also growing. Now that they're able to use satellite system to be able to pull data, and then adding sensors. So I previously did an internship with the satellite company, you know, that really wanted to expand in this area, and it's really interesting in how that their type of service can help. So farmers can use sensors to really detect, like, dry locations in their farm, or really wet locations in their farm, and so they can have proper irrigations, and all of that can come back to smart devices, an app that can be controlled on the phone, um, and equipment that can be monitored and automated. So here you can take a look at that. And then also banking is big, right? Um, and so with that, there's issues with data protection and security that you need to address. So this article is pretty cool. It gives you different perspective in different areas, and you can look to explore and expand on your ideas on how you can, you know, maybe build a startup or a business out of Internet of Things. Okay, questions? Okay, so I'm gonna go ahead and stop the recording, but please check out the notes, right, in case. And if you need help with, um, building like a small business, they also have business department that's tied to iMake Innovation Center at Moreno Valley College for entrepreneurship. So you can take advantage of that, and they can probably help you put together a plan. And there are also non-credit courses that will be available on the business side if you're interested in expanding that area as well.